to Thrive While Loving an Addict. I'm KL Wells, and I am thrilled and honored to have with me today Wendy B. Correa. She has written a memoir that hasn't quite come out yet, but I honestly can't wait to read it. It's called My Pretty Baby, and it's just full of standing at the edge and jumping, the typical journey of trauma, resilience, healing, and she has a big story and a big journey, and she is really an extraordinary woman in doing her work. And I want to just say welcome to our podcast.
Thank you so much. Lovely to be here.
So as we always kind of start, we start with, your original story, what happened in your childhood relative to your experiences and what eventually led you to writing the book.
Well, that's a lot of time. So I don't know how
Mhm.
much time you want to spend on the number one question. But in brief, I would say the origin and the genesis was the death of my father when I was 7 years old, which a tremendous trauma for a child. And back in 1964, we didn't have the information that we have today to
Mm.
explain to children about death. And no one told me what it meant or that, my father loved me and that he was
Mhm.
sorry he wouldn't get to see me grow up. And that he was very sick and that the doctors did everything they could. No one said really anything. No one
Wow.
explained anything to me about our talked about our emotions, about our grief, about our loss. And
Jeez.
particularly, and most extraordinarily, no one said to me, I needn't worry that my mother would also die, because that's exactly what a child goes to, is they immediately worry that the other parent is also going to die. And it took many, many years of therapy and a therapist to explain to me that a child will, especially a child under the age of 12, that is the most extreme trauma in parent loss, but that a child will then want to protect and care for the surviving parent.
Mm.
So that was the biggest trauma. But
Mm.
then within a couple of years, my mother chose a man to be her boyfriend and partner, and eventually her husband, who had alcoholism, mental health disorder, and was violent. And so that was the beginning of a tremendous trauma for me, of which then created complex PTSD and anxiety disorder, of being around a man who was sort of a Heckle and Jekyll. He could be loving, he could
Yeah.
be kind, he could be generous, and then he could lose his mind and tear down the Christmas tree and throw it across the room and threaten to kill everyone. And so by 9 years old, I was walking on eggshells and reading the room and trying to figure out what was going to set him off. And I watched him like a hawk when he drank, trying to decide how many beers it was going to be before something set him off. And so that was my experience growing up. But also there was layers of what else is going on in my family. It was easy to sort of put the finger on the death of my father and my alcoholic stepdad as
Mhm.
the dysfunction of my family. But as I got older and was able to gather more and more information, I was able to start what I call my pretty baby is an autopsy of my family. And
Mm.
I began to pull and peel apart the layers of intergenerational trauma, family dysfunction, addiction, mental health issues. I was able to say there's something else even more that's just under the surface.
Mhm.
And so it took me many, many years of trying to sort that all out. And in the meantime, I had to
Mhm.
flee my home in Illinois. I moved to California, got myself in college, and realized that I had missed out on a lot of things growing up. And so I just really piled on the courses, and the world was my oyster, and I just wanted to learn everything. But my intuition about needing to save myself and to survive
Mhm.
really was what thrust me into seeking. And the very first thing that I sought out in Humboldt County in Northern California is
Mhm.
obviously the beauty of nature. And
Mhm.
hiking and being in nature started to soothe me. I found a 3-day Zen meditation sheen, and that's when I began to understand how much I was holding my breath, waiting for
Mm.
another shoe to fall.
Mhm.
I realized I didn't even know how to breathe. It was
Mhm.
very disconcerting to me to see I didn't even know how to breathe. So I sought out meditation and Buddhism. I had always been drawn to spirituality, and I always felt my higher power, my inner wisdom, even
Mhm.
as a child, that little voice that would say, "This is not your fault. You did not cause this,
Mhm.
and you cannot fix this." And so thus began my journey, but it would be many, many more years of that
Mhm.
seeking and finding ways to heal myself. And, after the Buddhism and nature, I moved to Los Angeles, and music had always been a central focus in my life. I didn't have anything except for the radio. And so
Mm.
music raised me. I say that music raised me because I had WLS in Chicago and listened to Motown and all of the latest music. And that was really my beacon of light
Mhm.
that sort
Mhm.
of, informed me and educated me.
Mhm.
And so I eventually got into the music industry in Los Angeles. And in the music industry, I also got sober. And
Mm.
so then I also found a community of people who were practicing Native American spirituality with
Mhm.
Native people. And that's when I began years of doing sweat lodges and eventually did a vision quest. And so combined, as they say, it takes a village. It was
Mhm.
the intersection of Buddhism, nature, 12-step programs, Native American spirituality, psychotherapy,
Mhm.
as well as writing self-help books and so forth. But it would still take me many years after raising my son to actually sit down and start putting pen to paper and writing my story, which is coming out. My Pretty Baby is coming out November 4th,
Mhm.
and I'm very excited about that. And I'm very excited to be here with you today and to share my message, which is really a call to action for us to have these kinds of conversations
Mhm.
about intergenerational childhood trauma, adverse childhood experiences,
Mhm.
addiction, and mental health issues, that we need to have these conversations
Mhm.
without shame, because I feel that is the way we're going to heal our society. And I also
Mhm.
feel that your generation, my generation, the current generation has so many more tools and
Mhm.
ability to be like a podcast, like a book, like writing articles, to be able to have these conversations. My mother, who was born in 1918, used to say to me, Wendy, we didn't have Oprah
Mm.
when I was coming up. Like nobody talked about these things and nobody
Mhm.
would. And I might point out too that a lot of our parents, our grandparents in this country are immigrants.
Mhm.
And the whole immigrant story is a story of intergenerational trauma. They
Absolutely.
had to survive, they
Mhm.
had to stuff their feelings and their emotions, and they didn't have time to talk about the the challenges that they were going through. They had to just get up every day and put one foot in front of the other
Mhm.
and hope that today is going to be a better day than yesterday. And so many people of many cultures from many countries and nations that arrived on these shores
Mhm.
came with a lot of their own trauma. And that
Mhm.
trauma has just continued to
Mhm.
trickle down to those of us who are currently living. And that is what I hope my book is, just a spotlight
Mhm.
on family trauma, family dysfunction. Can we please just have some conversations about it?
Mhm. Mhm.
And for people who have been affected in any way by any of these issues, that my book might be a guidebook for
Mhm.
them to begin to take some steps to heal themselves.
Mhm.
Because I believe also, especially if you have a child, the best thing that you can do for your child, the best gift you can give your child is to be the cycle breaker, to
Mhm.
be the one that says the trauma ends with me. So
Mhm.
that's a long-winded answer to your first
Well, that
question.
was a beautiful introduction. And so, what I'm curious about is stepping back a little bit and asking you, do you remember when you started to think this isn't normal and I need to learn more? Because I remember, I think I was about 10 or 11, and I thought this isn't normal. Unfortunately, my mom would take us to the library. So I started getting autobiographies to read other people's stories and to see, okay, there's another way to do this thing called life that seems very crazy to me right now. So do you have a memory of that for yourself?
Certainly the first time that my stepdad got violent when I was 9 years old, and we had gone to a Christmas Eve party at one of my parents' friends' house, and the children of the host, or it was the family's tradition to open their gifts on Christmas Eve. So my
Mm-hmm.
brother and I just sat there like two dopes because there were no presents for us. And, these children were tearing open these gifts and gleefully, having so much fun. And I couldn't wait for Santa Claus to come the next day. And the adults were drinking this disgusting Swedish concoction called glug. And we got home that night, and I was so excited. I asked my mom if my brother and I couldn't just open one gift before we went to bed. And as my mom was saying, sure, here's a pair of socks, open that. My stepdad lost his mind and said, no, expletive. It's not Christmas, expletive, expletive, and proceeded to grab the Christmas tree and throw it across the room. And then, proceeded to threaten to kill all of us. My brother and I had to get picked up by our 21-year-old sister, who took us to our aunt and uncle's house. And obviously, with my sister cursing all the way, and my aunt and uncle talking about what a loser my stepdad was and that my mother shouldn't be with him. I got the message that this is not normal, this is not right. And so I got that message loud and clear, but still my mother continued to stay with him, and I continued to have a life of these episodes, but then a child will internalize that. There
Mm-hmm.
must be
Mm-hmm.
something wrong with me.
Right.
He wouldn't be like this if I hadn't asked to open the present. Like, this is all my fault.
Mm-hmm.
And he wouldn't be violent towards me if there wasn't something wrong with me. So
Mm-hmm.
I had kind of a pulling of messages because intellectually, I
Mm-hmm.
was like, yeah, there's something wrong here. But internally, as a child, because I got these messages, there was like, what's wrong with me?
Mm-hmm.
So I got the message pretty strongly, but it kind of, I had to really pull and to stay with that message that it's not me.
Right. So for our audience, I think it's really important to understand that a lot of us go through childhood trauma, and we want to talk about ACEs in a little bit. And as a child, we do what you said. We blame it on ourselves. We're constantly surveying the landscape, hyper vigilant to make sure that we're going to be safe or what's going to show up, and we're trying to modify our behavior so that it doesn't trigger them, and all of those kinds of things. And then it becomes the rework of our patterns of thinking and behavior and emotion if we choose to do the work on the other side of this in adulthood.
That's right. And it takes years to undo those
Mm-hmm.
messages as a
Mm-hmm.
child that get so ingrained and rewire our brains.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
Absolutely. It
Mm-hmm.
takes years.
Yes. And so we're super fortunate that we live in a time when the research is so pervasive relative to our brain science that we know we can rewire our neural pathways. And so like all the work that you spoke about earlier and all the work that I've done, it has been in service of rewiring my brain, your brain, so that we can live a thriving life.
Absolutely. And what I was very excited to learn only in the last 10 years, reading the work of Gabor Mate, Andrew Kolk, and Peter Levine, and Nadia Burke, is that these modalities that I sought out at a very young age, it turns out were the exact modalities that they say we can practice to help rewire our brains. So meditation and nature and psychotherapists, but also yoga and somatic modalities such as massage, singing, writing, and obviously sobriety. But what I loved about rewiring the biology, as Dr. Gabor Mate says, is that trauma, it isn't just an external event. It's what
Right.
happens inside of us. And
Mm-hmm.
the stress literally changes the brain and the body, especially in the central nervous system and the immune system. And trauma does not just disappear, it hides in the nervous system. And anxiety, addiction, even chronic illnesses are often the body keeping score, as Dr. Bessel van
Mm-hmm.
der Kolk puts it.
Yes, absolutely. And so this is super rich, this conversation, because number one, I love that you wrote your book because it takes us through the journey of the trauma, but then a realization of actually intuitively stepping into these modalities of healing, and then more understanding as you're getting older and continuing to explore other modalities that you can actually take your power back.
Yes. Well, and a lot of people do ask me also why I wrote My Pretty Baby. And I often say that I realized that my family's dysfunction and secrets had written my biography
Mm-hmm.
and
Mm-hmm.
hence my biology. And I
Mm-hmm.
wanted to rewrite my story and choose my own happy ending.
Mm-hmm.
But more than even my story, it's about how millions of us carry wounds that science now shows rewires our biology and impacts our health and
Mm-hmm.
relationships for life. 61% of adults have at least 1 out of 10 of the adverse childhood experiences score. And the adverse childhood experiences study found two-thirds of adults had at least one ACE, and 1 in 6 had four or more.
Mm-hmm.
And the trauma that you carry from childhood can increase your risk for addiction,
Mm-hmm.
mental illness,
Mm-hmm.
and many chronic illnesses. So I believe that trauma is a public health issue that we
Mm-hmm.
need to address. And in her research for The Deepest Well, Dr.
Mm-hmm.
Nadine Burke found that if a child has 6 or more ACEs, their life expectancy can decrease by 20 years.
Mm-hmm.
And you could find this score online very easily, just Googling to find the ACE score. I have an ACE score of 7. But the good news, again, as we said,
Mm-hmm.
is that the
Mm-hmm.
research is proving
Mm-hmm.
that the damage can be reversed with
Mm-hmm.
those same exact modalities that I outline in my book or any other modalities that you find that is healing for you.
Yeah. And so two things are going through my head. One is the courage that it takes to write the book from a vulnerable, honest place. Absolutely. And by writing your story, you are in fact breaking the generational pattern, and you're giving the gift to others to realize that they can break their own generational pattern.
Yes, that's my hope. That's my wish that my book, My Pretty Baby, is a beacon of light for other people who may not even know where to start. And I want to
Hmm.
say, healing is not a linear event, it's not a straight line. Sometimes it takes two steps forward and one step back. It's the proverbial peeling the emotional onion layer
Hmm.
that you think you've healed a particular issue and then something else comes bubbling up.
Hmm.
And you may feel like you've made great gains, and then another layer of pain or hurt is
Hmm.
revealed. And I believe it's a full-time job for me for
Hmm.
the rest of my life to continue this work and this healing. And I continue to practice all of the healing practices that I outline in my book, particularly yoga and hiking and walking and dancing and somatic and Buddhism and meditation. But sometimes something will still set off my fight,
Hmm.
flight, anxiety cycle. And I know that I have to be very protective of my central nervous system,
Hmm.
because I was raised in a home where I didn't feel safe. So I
Right.
learned survival techniques like dissociation. So I
Hmm.
can easily, my husband and I will be watching something on TV and I'll ask him, wait, what just happened? Because I've gone somewhere else.
Hmm.
And,
Hmm.
I know that I do that quite often. I know that my central nervous system needs a lot of calmness and protection to feel
Hmm.
safe and secure. And so I use a lot of these modalities to take care of myself. And that's what I hope people will learn. And that, I also want people to have compassion for their own central nervous systems and
Hmm.
not feel like, oh, what's wrong with me? And why can't I just deal with this? That that is what I hope people understand is to learn how to have compassion and to hold themselves in grace.
Hmm.
Because once you've, especially as a child, once this trauma has been ingrained in your body, in your brain, in your blood, in your bones, it
Hmm.
does take a lifetime of healing.
Hmm. Yeah, it is a lifetime journey. And I was talking to a young man yesterday, and we were talking about, kind of the traumatic times that we're living in and skilling up to be able to be the calm in the storm. And I said, when for me, I've trained myself that when something shows up that takes it to another level in terms of the severity of what's taking place, I up my self-care. I don't let
Mhm.
things go because I know that in order for me to live the life that I want to live, do the work that I love doing, I want to be the calmer in the storm. And so I'll add another thing on top of that. And, you and I have talked about this a little bit as I'm getting ready to do another 9-month vision quest process, which will take me into sweat lodges, over the next 9 months every month, because I need an extra added layer to be able to help others navigate the chaos and the disruption that we're in. So that's another thing that I hope our audience can take from this is we can rewire, we can
Mhm.
change the story of our lives in a direction that we choose. We can learn to incorporate things that keep us healthy and thriving on a daily basis. And we can learn that when something shows up, we just grab another tool.
Absolutely. Grab something from the It Takes a Village toolbox.
Hmm. Hmm. Yes, absolutely. So we had talked before we got on, and there's a portion of your book that you touched on that speaks very much to me relative to your first experience in a sweat lodge. And so would you mind sharing that with us, just a little bit of the what you wrote? Because there's a peace and a calm about that that's incredibly powerful. And and I thought you did a brilliant, beautiful job of describing what was my experience also.
Yes, thank you. I would love to. My pretty baby.
Great.
So I had been invited to a sweat lodge, and this passage is after the fact of coming out of the sweat lodge. I reflected on my experience. In the sweat lodge, I felt like I was coming home, I told my friend who had invited me. not only symbolically, as if returning to the womb to be rebirthed, but in that circle of prayer, the humility of praying for my life and my loved ones with others who also prayed for their lives and loved ones was the first time I felt so included and safe in a group of people. Even in AA meetings, I only share a little because I am so shy. But in the lodge, in the anonymity of the dark, in the sacred space, I felt freer to share my burdens and fears. My friend looked at me knowingly. Oh, you're a friend of Bill W. too, huh? Just so you know, each time that you participate in the sacred Inipi ceremony to share your prayers, vulnerability, and gratitude, you strengthen the web of life, not just for yourself, but for the whole community. So I hope you will come back next weekend. Oh, I will, I said quickly. I definitely will. I knew that everyone had struggles, but to hear people share theirs out loud without shame made me feel safe to do so too. It assured me that I was not a failure for struggling. The prayers we'd voiced that day had also included the gratitude each of us had for the good in our lives. Acknowledging that gratitude was comforting, healing, and hope about the future and my family returned to my heart. I was in awe of everyone's profound honesty and vulnerability in this community and how each person was acknowledged for exposing their hearts. I could see how each time people participated in this ceremony, they would be cleansed and wrung out over and over. With each sweat lodge I attended, I was sure I would become more connected to my deepest, truest self, or in AA terms, my higher power or highest wisdom. The atmosphere was light and vibrant and friendly. Everyone smiled and hugged. I felt baptized, more so than when I was officially baptized at 8 years old and didn't understand why or what was happening.
Mhm.
I was home here, despite how new I was to the community. I'd found my spiritual family and I belonged. I belonged. In the tradition of many native tribes, you make relations. You adopt people as family.
Mhm.
It has nothing to do with flesh and blood, nothing to do with lineage. It has nothing to do with your nationality, your race, or your gender, only with sincerity and heart and authenticity. I was filled with gratitude to be connected to this little community in the great web of life. Oh, Mata,
That's just beautiful.
thank you.
And it speaks to the power of love in a community. And, what I understand to be true is that 95% of our success in terms of rewiring is the community that holds us. So being super choiceful about what community you step into. And so if somebody's hearing about sweat lodges for the first time on this podcast, I want you to know that both of us were incredibly choiceful, discerning about who we have chosen to work with, because not everybody is worthy of working with.
Absolutely, 100%.
Mhm.
Really only practice with either native people or the people that those native elders had trained and had vetted. So it was a very safe environment with many, many years of experience and with a blessing of traditional native people. So I would
Mhm.
highly recommend that people, and you would never pay to attend a ceremony. That's very
Mhm.
important to understand. You may give an elder a gift for
Mhm.
participating or
Mhm.
contribute to their travel expenses or food, but you would never pay for to attend any Native American ceremony.
Mhm. Thank you for sharing that. And so if this is not something that somebody would choose that's on this podcast, just be really clear about the power of community in your journey of healing. And because who we surround ourselves is who we become. And I kind of extend that to, who we listen to on a podcast, who we read, who we listen to on the radio or TV or all of these things, is in some form or fashion, they are the community that surrounds us.
Absolutely. And that is so important, obviously, for anyone who is, getting sober or attending any 12-step meeting. That's the reason that these programs work is, or one of the many reasons that these programs work is because it does create a community of like-minded people who are also trying to get sober. And so you're surrounding yourself with people who have a like mind in that regard. But also, as you say, whatever you're consuming, again, you need to protect your central nervous system. You need to surround yourself with people who only want the best for you and who bring out the best in you, who can support you. And that is where, of course, strong boundaries come in. Even with your family, you may need to have a lot of good boundaries to protect yourself.
Absolutely. And so I think about it in a little bit in terms of energy drainers and energy generators. And so paying attention to, when you meet somebody for the first time, if you're aware, you automatically will know energy drainer, energy generator. And in groups, absolutely paying attention to that too, because we want to generate powerful energy for ourselves. And so paying attention to that piece is mission critical, how I think about it.
Yes, absolutely. That's good advice. It's part of your healing. It's part of how you
Yes.
heal.
Yes, absolutely. And that's really what this program is about, is to be able to drop the walls of shame that keep us captive by telling our stories and by having examples of people who have been through incredible trauma and have chosen to rewrite their stories and to do their healing. And in all these different ways of healing, it's you keep looking for different modalities that fit for you.
Yes. And also just to touch back about boundaries. I know people often ask about my family story and estrangement. And I write about very strongly about forgiveness because I think that's very important to talk about, that if you're able to, forgiveness is very healing. However, forgiveness does not necessarily mean reconciliation. And I refer to the work of Buddhist psychologist Jack Kornfield. He writes that, forgiveness is for the forgiver. It is to give ourselves peace and grace and to let go of that resentment or that anger, which is also part of our healing process. And in her book, Drama Free, Nedra Tawwab says sometimes healing means stronger boundaries or even estrangement. And Eamon Dolan has a new book out called The Power of Parting. And he says that we should hold family to the same standards as friends. Walking away can be a form of survival. And Dr. Dan Siegel in Healing Trauma says that the roots of resilience is in being understood. That when someone truly sees and accepts us, our brain rewires. So safe connection is medicine. So that goes back to the community. Safe connection in a safe community or being around people who uplift us is good medicine and helps our brains rewire.
I love how you framed that. Safe people, safe community is medicine.
Yes.
That's incredibly powerful. So I'm going to challenge our audience to really be intentional about identifying who you feel super safe with. If you just have one, that's a toehold. Find another. Because if you created one, you know how to do that. Then create another. And pretty soon you'll find yourself with 2, 3, 4 people that you are safe with, which gives you the medicine that you need to do the healing that you want to do to rewrite your story.
Yes, absolutely. And
Mm,
hopefully that's where those communities, whichever one you choose to attend, 12-step communities. I attended A and Nicotine Anonymous, and
hmm.
there's many, many communities where you can go to begin to create your chosen people and that safe community. But in also circumstances too, my yoga community is a safe community for me. My writing
Right.
community is a safe community for me. My oldest friends are a safe
Mhm.
community for me. You know, you can find it in many, many ways.
Yeah. And, because creating community and connection seems to be a challenging thing for these times. The statistics are not promising relative to people's ability to step out of their house and risk their vulnerability and try to create friendships and communities. And so both of us are introverts. I just want to tell our audience that.
Yes.
And so, if we can be intentional and persistent as introverts, where we generally go for recharging is, the mountains or the ocean or to nature or to more solo, quiet things, if we can step out of our comfort zones and challenge ourselves to take a risk, to be courageous enough to take the risk,
Yes.
to engage with others and be very choiceful about who we allow in our circle, then you can too.
Absolutely. And the other thing that people need to be aware of is that it isn't going to necessarily be easy to heal. That's why you need to create a
Mhm.
support system of people who are there for you, that support you, that'll hold your hand in times when you're peeling that onion and another layer comes up. A lot of people in this culture, we have, you know, some people would say, oh, can't you just think positive to heal? And I like to say that in her book of the same name, Whitney Goodman calls that toxic positivity.
Mhm.
And when we deny our pain, we deny healing.
Mhm.
Real resilience comes from facing what happened and not papering over it with a smile or,
Mhm.
suck it up, buttercup kind of attitude.
Mhm.
The beloved Zen teacher Thich Nhat Hanh said that the art of happiness is also the art of suffering well. We must acknowledge,
Mhm.
allow, and embrace our suffering in order to heal it. And
Mhm.
as the wonderful poet Robert Frost even said, the only way out is through.
Yes. Could you say that again about the suffering?
Nhat Hanh said, the art of happiness is also the art of suffering
Well,
well.
mhm.
Because we have to, and in Buddhist psychology and in the books of also Jack Kornfield, in order to heal ourselves, we have to sit with the pain. A lot of times, addictions, whether it be food or cigarettes or alcohol or gambling, is an effort to stuff the pain. So we are trying to paper over our pain with substances or whatever else other addictions there may be. In order for us to heal, it's going to be uncomfortable. You're
Mhm.
going to feel
Mhm.
uncomfortable
Mhm.
in those emotions that bubble up, in those memories that bubble up, and you have to sit with that and you have to have compassion and
Mhm.
love for yourself as you are processing those emotions. Now, I also use psychotherapy and a form of psychotherapy called EMDR,
Yes.
eye movement desensitization,
Mhm.
which is considered by the World Health Organization one of the best processes, modalities to process traumatic memories. It doesn't take away the memories. Of course, the memories are all there. But what it
Mhm.
does is it helps the brain to process them. So it
Mhm.
just sort of makes it, you're no longer triggered by that memory. The memory, of course, is there, but it's no longer painful to you. There's another modality called IMTT, which just helps you to see that event or to have that traumatic memory, but you basically soften it. You see it from a different perspectives. And so, this is new information we have, but,
Hmm.
Buddhist psychology and Zen Buddhism of Thich Nhat Hanh, even when writing his books, that we need to sit with these uncomfortable feelings in
Hmm.
order to process them so that we can move on. The first time I got drunk was when I was 10 years old, and I learned how well alcohol numbed the pain. And I continued to use alcohol and pot and nicotine for many years. And when I moved to LA, I added cocaine. And it was all about numbing myself from the pain of my family dysfunction and alcoholism and secrets and violence. And I had started taking steps towards sobriety with my very first meditation retreat and first finding the Buddhism and meditation and nature and hiking. I would take two steps forward and one step back. And it took me getting arrested for a DUI and court-ordered AA meetings to finally work towards real and
Hmm.
permanent sobriety.
Hmm.
That's when I used all the tools that I had been gathering to begin to sit with the uncomfortable feelings that were percolating inside of me.
Thank you for sharing that. I think about it relative to my own journey. I think probably earlier in my life, you would have said I was a workaholic, which is, just a different form, tends to be more lauded by our society for working hard, but it's the same idea is I didn't create any space for me to experience my own suffering and to grieve, the experiences that I had had. And so this really is a courageous work to be able to be present for our own grief, our own suffering. All I can say is that doing that work and being on the other side of it's so worth it.
Yes. And I love one of the reviews that I got from Reader's Favorite for my book. The reviewer said both heart-wrenching and profoundly hopeful. And that is
Hmm.
being able to hold both of those
Yes.
together.
Yes. And that's kind of the paradox of life. We can
Mhm.
hold both of those in the same space.
Yes.
Yes. So we're coming up against the edge of our time. I can't even begin to tell you how grateful I am for this conversation with you. This was incredibly powerful on so many levels and layers. And so, how can people get a hold of you? How can they get a hold of your book? How can you become part of their community?
Okay, so they can find me on Wendy B as in boy, Correa, which is CORREA.com. You can find me on Instagram at Wendy B Correa and Facebook at Wendy Correa. And I would just like to add that what I hope my readers will take away from my story is that trauma is universal, but so is healing. And telling the truth about what happened isn't about blame or retribution. It's
Hmm.
about breaking cycles and healing.
Hmm.
And again, I've said this before, but especially if you have children, one of the greatest gifts that you can give your children is to be a cycle breaker. And healing isn't just possible, it's contagious in the best sense of the word. Once you've healed yourself, you can
Hmm.
be a beacon of light to another person. And you
Hmm.
never know what your simple kindness to another human being
Hmm.
might do to lift them up and to help heal them.
Absolutely. Absolutely. Well, where can they get your book?
They can pre-order my book right now. It is available in all the channels, whether it be Bookshop or Amazon, Simon and Schuster, Barnes and Noble, and it will be available to you on November 4th. But if you pre-order it now, it will land with you right around November 4th. In addition to that, if you are in Denver, please come to my book launch at our fabulous Tattered Cover bookstore. And I'll be in Los Angeles at Diesel on November 9th. And then I'll be in San Francisco in Corte Madera at Book Passage on December 6th. I'll be at Explore Books in Aspen, Colorado on December 13th, and in Boulder, Colorado at Trident Books on February 2nd. Oh, again, Barnes and Noble in Denver, and locations that you can go to my website to find
Great.
again.
Yes. And so the website is?
WendyBCorrea.com.
Great. And we will have all of this in the show notes. So please, look for her website. I think she is remarkable, 10x remarkable. And so to our audience, thank you for joining us today. Thank you, Wendy. So grateful for you.
Thank you so much for this opportunity. This is a wonderful conversation, and I'm really happy to be here with you today.
Great. So take care, everybody. Until next
Thank you.
time.